Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining today. And we're going to get started.
All right, good morning. My name is Tiffany, and I'm a farmer here in Southwest Minnesota, just outside of Redwood Falls. Going to be sharing a little bit about my story and how kind of I got started on the cover crop, strip till, no-till journey. Joined here by Brian Pfarr.
Hi, I'm Brian Pfarr. I'm with the Redwood SWCD, and I also farm. And Matt and I talked quite a bit about how to get things going and how to get people started. And I'm going to look at some of the program side of stuff too to help farmers get started.
So Jennifer, should I share my stuff and get started?
Yep.
All right. Jennifer's over here to my right. She is kind of watching the chat room and finding any questions that people have and trying to forward those on to us so we can try to answer them best we can. I'm going to try to share here, which I should be able to figure out. All right, Jennifer, can you see that? All right. Technology is great, and so far it's seeming to work. Like I said, my name is Tiffany, and this is a little bit about what we do. I work with my dad, Bruce. We raise corn, soybeans for seed. All of our soybeans are for seed production for Bayer here in Redwood Falls. And we also grow cereal rye, which I clean and sell as a cover crop seed, and I do some for another seed company as well. So we'll try to keep this quick. I got a bunch of slides, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the why, how, and when to kind of maybe get started into these programs or different systems, or really change what you're doing. So first, you got to have a why. Why would you want to change and whatnot? Is it to address a problem you're seeing? Is it to try to squeeze some extra dollars out of necessity? Is somebody telling you have to? Which unfortunately, I think may be coming at some point. Maybe it's a landowner that wants you to do that. But and then when you have a why, you got to come up with a goal. What is my goal? In cover cropping, is my goal to reduce erosion? Is it to minimize tillage? Is it to provide feed? Figure out a goal, and that's going to help guide you when you make some decisions. The day I started was this day, May 17th, 2012. We were planting soybeans, which requires us, for what I do, to get in and out of the tractor and clean out the planter and whatnot. It was a terrible day. Wind was blowing soil all over, and we had some corn that was up that got sheared off from the dirt and dust, and I had a sweet corn field that's waiting until June to get planted with no cover. And I looked at it and thought, I need to do something different. So that's May in 2012. That's my why, is we got to stop erosion. As we moved forward, what I found is there's a whole lot of other benefits that these cover crops and reducing tillage were doing for me. And they're kind of listed here. Another picture from our neighbor that had a road ditch full of dirt a different year, also in the spring. Nobody wants to see that. And I think one of the big reasons is the why. And as much as we don't like to do things to benefit everybody else, we got to do it to benefit us. But is that public perception? When more and more of our population is moving to the metro area and getting farther removed from farming, they're driving down Highway 212, let's say, or Highway 71 or anywhere, and they see what you see on that picture. Those people are coming back with a perception of farming that maybe isn't favorable. Those are people that are voting. Those are people that voice their opinions with their legislators. And there will be restrictions if all of our road ditches look like that. So that public perception to me is really important, because those people have the ability to make rules that I have to follow. And it may not make any sense to us farming. So that's one thing that I've kind of gained as time has gone on. So we started with cover crops. It seems something fairly easy. Got the idea I needed to do something different in 2012. It wasn't until 2014 that I actually came up with a good plan. 2012 wasn't a lot of cover cropping going on. It was hard to find information. It was definitely hard to find people with any data to say, hey, here's what we did, here's the results. So that's where we started. These are some of the pictures of where we are now, but where we started was 2014, and it was before sweet corn. I broadcast oats with my P&K fertilizer, worked it in with the field cultivator, and from there, lots of things went wrong. It rained and it rained and it rained that month, and I had 30-inch tall oats. I'm supposed to plant sweet corn in 2 weeks, and I've got all these oats growing. What do I do? Hired a plane to spray it. Okay, now the oats are dead, but they're still standing and there's water standing in them, and how in the world am I going to plant these? Rented a VT tool, a sulfur, just to knock it down and try to get some air in there. It was muddy. I had wheel tracks everywhere. Planted it in the mud with a no-till, not even a no-till planter, just a standard spring down pressure planter. Basically, everything went wrong. The saving grace was probably the 3/4 of an inch of rain that we got after planting. And that really helped, I think, forgive some of those planting sins that we had due to too wet. And I was fully expecting 3 to 4 ton sweet corn here, which is not a good yield. And I was watching it, and the field guy from Del Monte was watching it. And when it got harvested, we ended up at 7.67 tons per acre. And I asked him, so how's that compared to the neighbors and everybody else that planted on that time? And he said, you're right in there with everybody else. And I kind of found that really shocking, and the fact that there were a lot of things that went wrong, yet that corn yielded the same as everybody else. And that gave me some confidence to at least do it one more time and see how it goes. So the picture there, I planted in straw. It was mud and straw, and little corn plants there, and there's no reason that corn should have yielded the same. But I do firmly believe that having that cover crop changed that soil to help us weather some of that stress that it went under. So tried it again. We did that for quite a few years until we couldn't grow sweet corn anymore, and then progressed on. 2014 was also the first year we did cover crops after our sweet corn. We demoed 3 different vertical tillage tools to incorporate the seed. We had the kind of had the co-op broadcast the seed. We ran the vertical tillage tools, and we were going to buy one, and we were going to buy it based on how that cover crop emerged. We tried a sulfur that didn't move a lot of dirt. Tried another sulfur that was more like a disc plow type thing, moved a lot of dirt, and we did a sunflower that was kind of in the middle. And the sunflower has the most even cover crop emergence, so that's what we bought. Here's the spring of 2015. We're going to go soybeans into this. Now we're coming out of more of a conventional tillage program. So we burned it down, and we worked it with our newly acquired sunflower, and that's kind of what it looked like. And you know, this first year we were learning. We learned some things that year. Here's how the soybeans went. Again, we have a much longer what went wrong list than we have a what went right list. Where we planted the soybeans into the cover crop, we let the rye grow too tall for tillage. It was a very lumpy seed bed, which resulted in poor seed depth control. We had seeds on the soil. We had seeds in the soil. We had a lot of residue. It was extremely rough to plant and spray. And then we sprayed with Fierce, or it'd be the same thing as Valor or Rowell or Authority, any of those. That stuck to the residue, and then we got a rain right as the soybeans were emerging, and that herbicide washed off the residue, and it killed a lot of our beans. Not a good deal. Lots of learning. Some things that did go right is, we didn't have any soil movement. We had to have an isolation border because we were growing regulated soybeans. So we had a real nice border of cereal rye. And I guess I'm fairly optimistic, but it provided a lot of learning opportunities. So from there, we've adjusted some things, planting into that rye. There's kind of a root ball that cereal rye has. And this stuff was planted after sweet corn in probably late August, maybe around the Labor Day period. And you get such a root mass even from a short growing season with that rye. But if you have a whole field of those, you can understand why it's kind of a challenge to plant with, and maybe why you shouldn't till it up. We've incorporated our cover crops multiple ways. The sweet corn was excellent for us because it gave us a small amount to try with, 50 acres out of our whole operation to try. It gave us a window to plant before the sweet corn, yet it's an earlier harvested crop. We can get it seeded afterward as well. We've flown on in corn, drilled it. What I found is the best way to get a good cover crop emergence and a good stand is to get it in the soil. So drilling it, a VT tool, some way of that you can get some seed to soil contact certainly has helped us. Currently, here's what we do. We've gotten rid of the tillage pass in the spring. We plant into it green. 2018 was the first year we planted into it green. So we progressed from spraying it and working it in 2015. 2016, we sprayed it and then planted into it dry and dead because we did not like working it. And we did that again in 17, and then we had built up the confidence that, okay, let's try it green. And we found that that's worked the best. We removed that tillage pass, then we burn down the rye after we plant the soybeans. Most of the time we don't put in a pre-emerge herbicide. That rye usually breaks dormancy in April and outcompetes any weeds that we have. So it's a pretty clean field after you burn down that rye. There's really not much growing. We found excellent weed control. We hold our soils in place, just some pictures there, and lots and lots of residue, which helps protect that soil. And really the main thing is, and what everybody's after is, how's it yield and does it make money? If people talk about sustainable ag, and it's not sustainable if you lose money. It just doesn't work. And I'm a production farmer. I need to get a profit. And every year we've done this, we have seen a positive yield increase with our soybeans into rye versus the soybeans not into rye. Same variety. And it may not be a huge amount, but it's always been a positive. It has never been a lower yield. And that's, since 2015 doing it. So we've got 5 years of data that show that. So to me, it gives me the confidence that we can do this and it's not going to cost us any money. So, the picture up there in 2019, it was, a late year. It was wet. Everybody remembers late planting season. That rye was headed out, and in June, that was the only field I could plant because that rye was taking up moisture that I could actually get into that field and plant. There weren't any other fields that I could seed that year. That day. Just that rye changed that soil and used moisture. 2018, here's a comparison. We had sweet corn in that field. We used Field View and for kind of some of our analysis, kind of because they force us to use it, but if they make us use it, I'm going to use it. So we had a no rye cover crop 2017, after the sweet corn, we had seeded a cover crop. Here's the 2018 soybeans. We had planted, we have multiple different varieties for what we do with the seed, but that orange zone, orange region is all one same variety. The north region yielded 48.8, and these were planted probably, well, it says up there 518, 48.8 on that north area with no rye. The region where we had the rye, which is inside the white box there, same variety, is circled with 57.65. That's an 8.83 bushel difference side by side where we had the rye. Same variety, same planting date, everything else is the same fertility. The difference is rye and no rye. That was that year. If you look down there, there's a blue variety too, that RM1917. That one was a 1.8 difference, excuse me, a 0.8 difference. So that one even showed it too. Different variety, yeah, different variables. But that was that year. We're moving towards more corn and covers. We strip till and no-till, and utilizing and working covers into our corn rotation is something that we're working on now. That does provide some challenges. You know, soybeans are extremely forgiving with seed depth and spacing and growth stage. Corn's a different animal. It needs to be even. It needs to be, you know, good spacing, good seed depth. Let's not pinch residue in that seed furrow. So managing those covers is a little different. We found it really beneficial in the strip till, because the strip till, when we make those strips in the fall, terminates the cover in the strip, but it leaves the cover growing in between the strips. And that gives us, you know, it kind of gives us a jump start on getting that microbiology working in the spring, because we've got that, well, we'll call it a furnace. We got that furnace burning in between the strips, and in the strip, we've got our fertility, we've got our nutrients there, and we've got a good seed bed without the cover crop. So we've seen some really good stuff with that. We just started that the last couple of years, and you know, we're going to keep doing more and more of that, no-tilling into cover crops, and then adding it to our strip till. I do have one comparison on corn. We're going to go to our 2019 corn. So the same field that had that cover crop from 2017, I have the same regions. So we planted corn in there, and after the beans, 2018, we strip tilled it, planted corn in 2019. Everything is even, same hybrid. Now we have those same regions. No cover crop. Region on the top there went 184. Where we had the cover crop, same hybrid, planted the same day, went 208. That's a 24 bushel difference 2 years after the cover crop. And you can see there on the yield map, there is a definite line between right here, and this is a hill, light green, here's where the cover is, dark green. And you know, these are areas where we couldn't plant because it was too wet in 2019. But where we gained that is on this hilltop, that cereal rye that grew in the fall of 2017 added some, I should say, changed our soil properties that we could hold water here on this hilltop, whereas this hilltop that didn't have that cover crop and was more of a conventional tillage, that water ran off down into this basin. We stored that water here, our corn crop used it, and we added 24 bushels. That's just 1 year, one snapshot in time, but it really showed a lot to me that cover crop did something different in that region. How do we seed them? Like I said, we have a sunflower vertical tillage tool over here. We bought a Valmar air seeder that we pulled behind it. Yeah, it's tillage. Yes, you're moving some soil. We run this real shallow, 1 inch to 1.5 inches. The picture you're seeing it in is in a drowned out area, so that's why there's not much residue. But We seed a lot of covers that way in our cornfield. We don't really use it a lot in soybeans just because it moves more soil than we want, and we don't have the residue that we have with the corn. We've flown them on. I've got just a regular mounted double disc drill that I seed some with. And like I said, the most success is getting seed mixed with soil. There's a picture of a flown on result in the spring the following year, which I was really pretty pleased with how it came back in the spring. It didn't look like much in the fall though. And that's our goal. If we can get all of our soil to look like that, that'd be pretty amazing. But this would have been in a tile, when we were tiling, that's what it looked like in that 2015 or 2014 cover crop field. And we're blessed with some very, very good soil, high organic matter, and deep rich topsoils in some of these areas. So, we're not starting with 1% sand, 1% organic matter sand. We're starting with some better stuff. But that's our goal. That's what we're looking for. And that's what we're trying to build to. So we started with the covers. I started thinking about strip till in about 2015 and researched and went to a lot of different days, field days, and talked with people. Finally got up the confidence that, yes, this is what I want to do. Got a strip till rig in 2017 and just started doing that. And it really made sense to me, for the workforce, for the time, the labor, the fuel, all of that stuff. It made sense to me that strip till would work. I farmed with my father. He wasn't ready to jump all on board right away like I was, but we did some stuff. Did a few fields in the fall of 17, and we're going to compare. Oh, I guess I got a crooked picture on there, but I can't turn that one. Just a few pictures of what our strips look like. We do it all in the fall. We variable rate two products, a fertilizer with that, and we do that in the fall. Usually we're doing, depending on the soil temps, if it's cool enough, we will put a little bit of nitrogen in with our pass. Up to about 50 pounds of total N. So we'll run a DAP potash blend that we vary rate based on our grid tests, and then urea to get to that 50-pound total N usually. And we're placing this 5 to 6 inches deep in our strip. It's a shank machine. And there's a picture from our drone. It's got a Flexicoil twin bin cart with a 3-point on the back, and it pulls our strip till bar. So yep.
What is the organic matter that you're starting out with?
Good question. A lot of our fields average, and we grid test everything, but the average on a lot of our fields are somewhere in that 4 to 4.5 is our average. The hills that you could call them eroded hills, or the higher spots, usually are in that 3 to 3.5. We do have some stuff that's peat ground that's 9 down in the low stuff. So that's not every field, but a lot of them are in the low areas are in that 5 to 7 range, probably averaging in that 6, and then the hills are a little lower. So we aren't starting out with terrible fields. That makes a challenge, a little more challenge. I wouldn't say challenge. It makes it different no-tilling, which I'll talk about too. But there are some challenges in the strip till. It's a totally different. It requires a different operator level than full width tillage. You need somebody that can understand. Okay, this is my seed bed. I need to adjust this piece of equipment to make sure that my seed bed is how I want to plant into it. There's the technology end, as far as guidance, and when you make those strips, you need to make them how you want to plant the field. And if you're doing a fertilizer application, there's understanding the nutrient management end of it too, and the technology that controls that. The logistics of tending fertilizer can create some issues. Some people are going to say it's expensive and you can't find it. And I'm going to counter back with, I spent $35,000 on that machine. It was used. You can't buy a used field cultivator in decent condition for $35,000. And if you have that, you're going to have the other tillage equipment. I have one machine that does all my tillage. And if you buy one new for $125,000, a new ripper and a new field cultivator are going to cost you about $150,000. So you're still cheaper. And there are all sorts of cost share programs and things that you can utilize. And I utilize the Ag BMP low 3% financing program to buy mine. That there are programs out there to, either get some cheaper financing or find ways to make it happen. So I'll shoot a hole in it. It's expensive for you. But some other challenges, if you're trying to get all of this done in the fall of 2018 was a challenge because it was wet, and you're not making great strips when it's wet. You get a lot of lumps and stuff. So getting it done can sometimes be an issue. This last fall was excellent. It was beautiful. We got it all done on time. We had better soil moisture. We had much nicer strips, which is going to result in a better seed bed in the spring. If you have questions, there aren't a lot of people that are doing it, and that can be hard to get some support. And that's really where the Soil Health Coalition and other networks that you have can really play into answering those questions. There's a producer north of me about 20 miles. He strip tills, and he was a great resource for me to bounce some questions off of, hey, Dean, what are you doing here? What do you do in this situation? I've got another friend down by Wells, Minnesota, that he strip tills, and I've leaned on those guys heavily just to answer my questions. So, and really the biggest thing for any of these programs is a mindset. If you go into it thinking this isn't going to work, I'm just doing this to say I did it, it's going to fail, and it's just going to fail. So having that mindset of, okay, this is different. Yeah, none of my neighbors are doing it. I love that. I like to be the guy that people drive by the field 3 times and stop, and I'll stop and get out and talk to them because they're curious. And to me, that's fun to be doing something different. So that's me. That's not everybody. But having the right mindset that this can work and having an open mind. The benefits, I wasn't going to list every benefit on here because there's just so many of them. For me, it's a time savings. It's reduced passes in the wet springs. And the first year that we planted in the strips was 2018. It was wet. There's no wheel tracks in your seed bed. And we saw a huge difference that first year in our corn versus the others. We didn't see the diagonal lime green tillage tractor strips through the field. Ours was even. It was all the same color because we didn't have that tillage pass. We didn't have that compaction from the tillage tractor. It's better for our soil. And ultimately, the bottom thing there, it's increased profitability for us. Whether it's through less expense or increased yield or both. We have better fertilizer savings because we're banding our nutrients versus broadcasting. Our own personal numbers gave us a $22 an acre versus if we would have broadcast that. We reduce our fertilizer rates because they're banded. We go at about an 80% of a broadcast rate, which kind of falls in line with university recs, and we have not seen it lower our yield. So we're saving some money up front, and the time. On our farm, if we would go full width tillage, we would have spent 50 hours more time. That's a whole week. And I can do a lot of things with a week, whether that's far more acres because I now have the time, whether that's doing custom work with that strip till machine, whether that's taking a vacation with my wife, which doesn't happen, but she would love it too. That's a week. And that's real time, or it's time that I don't have to pay somebody to do the work. So
Here's a question.
Yeah.
Your fertilizer rates, kind of where did you start at when you kind of got in this in 16 or 12 or 14, and where are you kind of at now for fertilization?
So our fertilizer rates, we were kind of always doing if you want to talk about NPK rates, we were always doing a full nutrient removal rate. So somewhere in that 77, I guess we'll go in first. Somewhere in that 160, 70, 70 is typically where we were, and 10 of sulfur broadcast. Now, and I think I've got a picture here, maybe it's back here. There you can see our rates that we're variable rating now. Our potash, at least in this field, was 43 pounds, and our DAP was 86 pounds. So that's 86 pounds of DAP. So I don't know what that converts out to be of actual P. 86 times 0.86 or 0.46. Oh, 86 times 0.46. That's 40 pounds. So a lot of what we've done has reduced that rate to about 80%, is where we're targeting. Our N rates, we typically have really tried to push the boundaries and lowering our N use efficiency. So a lot of the stuff that we're at is somewhere in that 0.6 to 0.75 pounds of N per bushel. What we found is 160 pounds of N in most cases is more than adequate than what we need. And by split applying our N, we've been able to reduce that and maintain the same yields. So we apply N really 3 different times, or 3 different passes. We'll put some in with the strip, 50 pounds of total N. We put some more on with the planter with liquid, and then we side dress the bulk after that. So really 3 different times we're applying our N. I really like the strip for our P and K application, because our non-mobile nutrients, we're getting them in the root zone 5 inches right below the plant, which I think is part of the keys of that fertilizer efficiency. Is it's right under the crop where we need it, and not 30 or 15 inches off in the middle of the row. So, and you have less soil to fertilizer interaction, so more of that is probably available and not being tied up by our calciums and our positive charged ions in our soil. The equipment we have, we run a shank machine. It's a nifty ag shank machine. We're on 30-inch spacings. The fertilizer cart there is a flex coil 2340 twin bin. We pull it with a 320 horse front wheel assist tractor that we already had and that we were already using. We had the Trimble equipment to control the fertilizer, and we use the RTK network from Mincors, which is free. Has been really reliable, especially during planting season. It's been pretty good for us, which we were already using before. So the investment for us was really buying the strip till rig and converting it over to run off of the Trimble. And like I said, I bought it out in Michigan used. It has some drawbacks. It's maybe a little more aggressive than I like, and I'm looking at maybe doing some modifying and making it so it doesn't have a 2-inch point, but just some different mold knife options. But the strip till for us has really, I think, advanced us in our profitability and is maybe a gateway to more and more no-tilling. So we'll talk about no-tilling. Opportunity. A landowner approached me back in 2018. Oh. Had a landowner approach me in 2018. Oh, now something happened. Jen, are you messing up stuff?
I can hear you.
Yeah, but my thing went away. My PowerPoint went away. Here, go to stop share. Oh, let's talk then. All right, see if you can figure out the stuff. We'll try to get the PowerPoint back up here. It's got a sad face on the other one, so we'll see if that comes up. I'll just keep talking. In 2018, had the opportunity, a landowner approached me. They wondered if I was interested in farming some of their land. I said yes. It started out as an 80, and it grew to about almost 400 acres of what they had. And they were in a 3-year EQIP contract for no-till. So it had to be no-tilled. Otherwise, they were going to have to pay back the EQIP portion. I had never no-tilled and was a little apprehensive, but I had just gotten a new planter with all the precision goodies, Delta Force and V drives and all of that fun stuff. And I thought, okay, this planter can handle it. Let's give it a try. 2018 was a challenging year as far as moisture, but got started, edited it, and everything actually turned out really good. I'm going to see if my thing is back up. It is. Let's share that. Present that. Let me just get down to my, sorry about this. I know I'm doing a lot of talking too, and hopefully I don't talk too much. All right, 2018 started no-tilling. They had a little background on this land quickly. They were in an organic operation for 8 to 10 years. So you can picture lots of tillage, multiple times. Actually, that first picture of my Y came from, it was dirt blown off of one of their fields. Lots of tillage, poor weed control, not a lot of fertility added back. And then they went totally full circle and jumped into no-till and cover crops and grazing. They fenced it all, and they went from tillage and lots of it to no tillage and grazing. I'm jumping in here in 2018 in the 3rd year of that transition. Planted beans into rye that they already had, which I was totally comfortable with. And I no-tilled some corn on corn just to keep it in the rotation. And I was, at 2018, I was leery with no-till corn into rye. So I thought, well, people do corn on corn, I can manage that. So there's my no-till corn on corn. That planter did a fabulous job with the row cleaners and moving the residue out of the way. Even emergence, it looked great. The struggle was the nutrient management. You know, I hadn't even soil tested these fields. It just got it new to me in March, so I didn't have much time. 2018 was wet. Let's plant. We don't have time. Just planted corn. I spread my nitrogen on the surface, which what I know now was probably the wrong choice because it was all tied up and trying to break down that residue. And then it was so wet, I couldn't get in side dress. So I ran out of amp. I ran out of nitrogen on that corn on corn. You know, it yielded 120. That includes the drown out area. So I think it was like 135 without the drown outs, which it was kind of a failure. But what kind of made me want to do it again, or at least try it again, was I was talking to the neighbor who is across the road, and he's full with tillage, and he volunteered the information that his whole farm average was 121. And I thought, well, geez, you did all that tillage and you did all that expense, and you got the same yield as I did. And I just planted it and put on 150 pounds of urea, and most of it went down to breaking down residue. Well, that's not so bad. I guess I'll try it again. The beans and the rye and the no-till beans wasn't a concern. They yielded fine. This is a video of one of the fields, and I don't know if videos work on here. We're going to try it. This is really what made me want to continue. I don't know if that video is going to play. No, video is not going to play. Anyway, that video shows that field in 3 years is totally changing that soil. It's after one of the 4-inch rainfall events we had. I drove the Ranger everywhere out there. The soil is firm. You walk on the soil and it's the water squishes out. It's fully saturated. The water squishes out. You move your foot and the water goes right back in the soil. You don't sink in. And it was totally different than the stuff that we were used to farming. And this is only the 3rd year. The neighbor to the side is full width tillage. He has soybeans as well. His beans are dead. They've been in standing water for 3 years, or 3 years. It's been 3 years. In 2019, it was about 3 years of standing water. But 3 days, his were dead. Mine were alive. Totally different soil. Came back on a Thursday, the next day, and my pond is gone. He still has a pond. I came after 10 inches of rain to seed covers in those drown outs. I can drive through with my vertical tillage tool and seed it. He still has a pond. Totally different soil. And that really made me say, okay, we can do this. This is a good thing. That soil has changed. It helps weather the differences we have in weather, whether it's too much moisture or not enough. It's a good way to change our soil. And to me, I think it's going to add value and profit to my bottom line. There are some challenges. I think a lot of them revolve around planter capabilities and nutrient management. How are we going to manage? One, let's talk about planter. You got to, especially corn, we got to get that seed placed at the accurate, consistent seed depth, and we need to close the seed trench. And having the planter technology that we have now, I think allows you to do that. Or if you have older technology, getting out of the seat and adjusting things to make sure that this is doing what I need it to do. Add-ons to closing wheels and things like that to really make it so your planter performs like it needs to. For high yield corn, I don't believe, and university studies don't show that spreading your non-mobile nutrients on the surface is a good way to fertilize high yielding corn. So P and K on the surface, to me, that doesn't move in the soil quickly, doesn't make sense. So how do we do that? How do we get our non-mobile nutrients without tillage into the root zone? That was a challenge that I struggled with that first year, and I'm working to resolve. Nitrogen's pretty easy. It's mobile with water. You know, there's multiple ways we can apply it. That I think nitrogen is a little easier to manage. And sometimes terminating those covers can be a challenge. Like I said, that very first year, I didn't want a 30-inch tall oats. I wanted them dead sooner. Headed out rye in corn, I think can have some penalties with breaking down that residue and letting it get that tall. So that's my opinion. But I'm looking at growing 230 bushel corn. So benefits, a lot similar to the strip till, fewer passes, less equipment, more friendly for the environment. We're changing our soil to help mitigate risk due to the weather, improve crop health, nutrient cycling, and really profitability. I don't have a table here that shows my profitability of my no-till versus, I did have one conventional till farm, new to me this year, that had been tilled the previous year, ripped bean ground, real fun. But the no-till out yielded that full width till field, and profitable wise was $67 an acre more profitable on my no-till corn versus full width conventional tillage. So it has improved profitability. Planter, what I have for a planter, actually we have two white planters that they're both fully equipped with precision planting. They both have the Delta Force hydraulic down pressure, which I think is the best feature of them. They have the clean sweep row cleaners that we can adjust from the cab. that really move that residue, and mainly for corn, moving that residue keeps that residue from getting pinched in the seed furrow and whatnot. And then we apply 2 liquid products at planting, in one in furrow, 1034-0 in furrow, and then we have 2 tubes on the back right here that we run a 32% ATS blend, and that's variable rated by our Trimble system based on our organic matter for the sulfur. So the ATS is our sulfur source. We variable rate that, which of course variable rates are 32 as well, and then we variable rate our side dress pass usually at that V3 to V5 stage. So we utilize a lot of technology. We utilize grid sampling, and that's kind of what we base all of our nutrient management off of. Kind of looking at the management zone here coming up, incorporating past yield maps and whatnot. But right now we're going on.
Question, Matt, what is your grid sample area size? How many acres?
We're going 2.5 acre grids. You know, when you start breaking it down smaller than that, I think it gets, and having the equipment to adjust rates quickly enough to go smaller than that, I think is a challenge. But we go 2.5 acres. I really think the management zone makes that method, you know, different yield zones versus the grids is maybe a more reliable way to go, because you're bringing in yield results into those zones, which is just another layer of data that you can use. So we do use a lot of technology, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the background, but we have the equipment to do so. I've trained my father to do it fairly reliably, but he doesn't want to know all the capabilities. Just tell me what I need to know. So we talked about those non-mobile nutrients, and this is where I'm starting at trying to get them in the soil. My strip till, my fertilizer cart has a 3-point on the back. So I take off the strip till rig and I put together this Coulter Bar, and this is my cheap way to start with just some single disc openers. I built a dry boot to go on them. They were set up for 32%, but built a dry boot to go on them, and I band my P&K. They only get about 3 inches deep in the fall with this before my corn, and then I come back and I plant right on that band in the spring. So that's my way of getting my non-mobile nutrients in the soil profile, at least in some of that root zone, to plant my corn into. We manage the N, like I said, multiple times. With the no-till, we don't put any in this band. So some will be put on with the planter, and then we'll side dress the balance of that after. Our nitrogen rates are typically in that 140 to 145 range for total N. When to start? When to start is always a good question. Some of my recommendations there, we start small. We started with a 50-acre field with the cover crops. That first year of strip till, we only did about 100 acres, and mainly due to time, and I didn't know what I was doing, and there was a big learning curve. So we didn't get a lot done. But start in small increments, which, you know, if it fails, it's not going to bankrupt you. You know, and small is, you know, that's subjective. If you farm 2,000 acres, 200 acres is small. If you farm 200 acres, you know, 20 acres is small. Do it in an appropriate scale for your operation. No-tilling soybeans, I think, is the best way to start, because they're forgiving in spacing and growth stage and residue, and they branch and they flex. And I honestly think that's probably where you can save the most money, because you're taking out that expensive disc ripper pass that's the most expensive tillage pass on the farm. So start with soybeans, no-tilling soybeans. Keep your coverage simple, 1 to 2 species. And, you know, that first slide talked about a goal. If you have a goal for a cover crop, identify what that is. Is it, you know, minimize wind erosion? Is it water erosion? Is it feed? If you have livestock, covers are a great way to supplement your feed. I had a guy that brought cows to my field. He brought them in November and they left last week. He fed them out there for almost 3 months with just covers. Yeah, I didn't even charge him anything. I think I got a good deal. I'm sure, got a good deal. But start simple with your covers, compare, and then compare how it did with your other normal practice or what you had been doing. Have a reasonable expectation and a good mindset. And really, I think the sooner you start, the more you have to, you know, reap the benefits or more time to fine tune it and tweak it to better fit your operation. And then we've all heard that thing down there, never put off till tomorrow what you can do today. The sooner you start, the sooner you get to enjoy it. And I found it to be really rewarding in the fact that it's challenging me by having different things going on and making me think and find some challenges and having to overcome them instead of just the simple, we're going to work it in the fall, we're going to work it in the spring, plant, harvest, repeat type of deal. That just gets old. And it's fun to see the new things popping up and you know, just learning. And I kind of like this one, that the land that we're farming, it's not ours. It's, you know, we're using it, we're borrowing it. I like the idea of we're borrowing it instead of we've inherited it. So let's leave it in better shape than what we gained it, you know, got it while making a profit off of it. So, you know, I got some kids. I've got other younger people that are probably going to want to farm my land when I'm done, and I want it to be in a good shape when they get to work it. I think that's all I have. Question slide. Okay. I can stop share. You want me to mute here?
Is there are we on video? Okay.
Yeah, so if you guys have any questions, if you want to put it in the chat box.
Are they gonna unmute now?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead and unmute and ask if you want.
There was one question I saw on this one. Julie asked about. Are zones in the same strips each year? Do you stagger?
So there was a question by Matt over here about the strip tilling, the zones, are they in the same strip or do you move over? And that's a good question. Typically what we do, excuse me, we will strip after beans before corn. We're pretty much strictly a corn soybean rotation. We do have some cereal rye, a couple hundred acres we grow, and we'll go soybeans after that. But we'll strip on the bean row before corn, and then after corn, we'll move over about 7 inches or 10 inches and plant our beans, and then we'll strip on that bean row following the beans. So our region or our zone, our fertilizer zone, instead of stratifying it vertically like we might in a no-till situation on the surface and down, we're stratifying it spatially in the soil. So we'll have we get about a 10-inch strip. So if we are 7 inches here and 7 inches over, that's kind of where our strip is always going to be. So our fertilizer zone is about 20 inches wide. 7 here, the next year it's 7, 2 years, 7 here. I've toyed around with the idea of stripping between the bean rows and shifting at 15 inches every time. That kind of makes it a little more of a challenge to stay on the row because you're driving on corn stalks and with guidance and whatnot. it wants to throw you one side or the other. So if we're shifting 10 inches to plant our no-till soybeans, we're driving right next to the corn row and not on it, which makes life a little easier, and it's a little easier on tires too. So I hope that understood your question. From Miles, from what I understand, your main cover crop application is with VT after harvest. Yeah, we do a lot of that with our VT after corn. And so when's corn harvest done? 2019, it was frozen. We couldn't use our VT tool. We put it away. We flew on, I broadcast a bunch of rye on frozen ground. I was pretty disappointed with how that worked. It came up later, in 2020, we had normal planting time. So I didn't have any rye up before I planted beans. It came up after that, which wasn't what my goal was, but I learned. Our rates, usually if it's going to beans, I'll go about 1 bushel an acre. So some of that isn't going to germinate. Some of it is, but we typically go 1 bushel an acre. Latest successful planting of cereal rye, it all depends. This fall, we VT'd some late, and we had a good growing season, a long fall, I should say. It didn't really freeze up until December. There was little rye growing out there. Last year, we saw some, last year, we were tiling in late November, and it got into the 60s, and I had rye that germinated. It had been sitting out there for weeks after sweet corn, and it didn't do anything. So, it depends on the year. 2016, we saw excellent fall growth because it was a nice, long, late fall. So it varies. I'd say trying to get it seeded by the middle of October is probably a good place to shoot. Some people will seed it all the way till it freezes. I haven't had a lot of good luck frost seeding. Running it with the VT tool and mixing it especially with soil in the corn, and you have all that residue, I think is a good way to go with it. We have used the VT tool a lot after soybeans. I shouldn't say a lot, some. We are fortunate that we grow very early maturity soybeans for seed. So like early 00 maturity that, we started harvesting beans last year, August 31st. So we have this great window with our early beans to get a cover seeded that a lot of people don't. That said, I get to grow and harvest soybeans that grow from 00s all the way to 2.4s. And it's kind of been a trend in the last 5 years, though earlier maturity bean, and I know some growers saw it this year, are seeing the same or better yields than those later maturity beans. So that early group 1 to a group 4 soybean is having similar or better yield, which I think is good if you want to seed covers. You can go to an earlier soybean, not give up much yield, but then give you some room for a cover crop after soybeans.
So a question we have, kind of a misconception about cover crops. You're basically managing your cover crop spring.
Correct.
Not so much, the fall, and that's where a lot of people are like, I need these cover crops planted early enough so I get something for the fall. But in some cases like this, if you want to plant soybeans in rye, you're managing that cover crop in the fall, for spring development.
Absolutely. And Brian can get in on this too. My first thing when I got into this was spring. That was the thing for me is we don't have any residue. We have weather beaten soils that have been sitting out there all winter, and there's nothing growing. Minnesota, I think April is the windiest month in the state, and we have no cover. I wanted a cover in the spring, and that of course changes your goals, and it changes your cover crop options. You need, if you're going to seed it in the fall, you got to have something that overwinters. That's where the cereal rye fits in. It overwinters in Minnesota. I've done winter wheat. We've tried that stuff. Cereal rye is better. So like you said, I'm managing in the spring for my covers. The fall, Minnesota's tough in a normal corn soybean rotation to get a good cover crop growth in the fall. But I do think even 2 inches of cereal rye certainly protects our soil better than nothing, and it breaks up that wind. I have all sorts of pictures from our blizzard from earlier this winter on soil moving, and how my cereal rye cover crop gained me somebody's topsoil. So Lance has a question down there. Some future ideas going forward. Any advice on the power of networking and finding good mentors? Mentors, and I'm going to start with that second question. That has been huge for me, is the finding people to bounce ideas off of, because that mentorship and that being able to talk with other people has been extremely valuable, because they've made mistakes and I don't need to make the same mistakes as them. They've found, hey, this is what's worked for me. Don't spend the money on this. Don't try that. This will work. I did a lot when I started looking at strip till up in the Red River Valley with NDSU. U of M had their partnership, talking with them, going to the Conservation Tillage Conference, getting up with those guys, coming in here, talking with Brian and these guys, and just bouncing ideas off of people. And that's essentially what the Soil Health Coalition is for, is to, there's people here, there's mentors here that across the state in our coalition that have done stuff with livestock, they've done stuff with grazing, they've done stuff with row crops, and all of that can certainly help. So the power of networking is huge, and that's what really makes it work. Future ideas going forward for me and our operation, we've seen more and more success with less and less tillage. So for us, transitioning more of our stuff to no-till is something we're exploring. We've got some comparisons set up that we strip tilled the field, and then we ran the Coulter Bar on some of the field, and we're going to keep everything equal, and we'll compare corn yield with the Coulter Bar versus corn yield with the strip, and just see, the difference there is the tillage. It's a tillage interaction, and did that tillage yield us more? And it's about profitability. More future ideas. We have the opportunity to raise a small grain crop and have some profitability with it. I clean the seed, I sell the seed individually, and then I do some for a seed company. So that's a great way for us to introduce that small grain crop, which keeps a living root longer. It's an earlier harvested crop, so we can get a cover crop in there. And that's going to help transition some of that soil from even strip till into more of a no-till situation. So I'm going to kind of use that to transition more of our acres into no-till. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I think we're going to have a little bit of a break time. We're going to have more questions. Certainly think of some, put them in the chat, and we'll try to get those answered. Brian knows a lot too, so I might let him do some talking. But all great questions. No questions are dumb questions, and I'll tell you if I don't know. So let's take how long of a break? 10-minute break, and come on back.
Welcome to the breakout session. This is Jennifer Hahn. So this is the point where we get to have discussions about what Matt and what Brian were talking about. So we do see that there are some questions in the chat box, and let's see. So a bunch of people want in the break room. Can there be some direction given on what we're doing? Yes. So this is the time where we get to talk with each other about what we heard from Matt and Brian. So go ahead, feel free to unmute. This is a small enough group where we can all talk and discuss what we heard, formulate more questions, because after the breakout session, we'll also have an opportunity to bring it all together and ask them more questions as well. So are there any points or any things that the guys brought up, that you have questions on or that really hit home? I see Shannon Rosinski is in this group. We just lost her. I see Shannon Gegner is in this group. Shannon, do you have any thoughts from what you heard from Matt and Brian? How about, let's see, we've got TJ. TJ, I'm sure you have something to say. What did you think?
Jennifer, hold on a second. What did you say?
What did you think about what Matt and Brian were talking about? Do you have any reflections on it or more questions from it?
Well, so I think one of the great, just echoing through my speaker here. Hold on, I'm gonna turn it on. I think one of the great points they made was getting your mindset right in the beginning on this program, because failure comes from fear. We'll start with the word F or letter F, and that's the big part of this is fear and failure financially with your peers. Is you got to get your mindset right that you're going to make this change. The other thing I really liked what they said was the ability to sit there and start cutting costs by all the equipment you don't have to purchase anymore. And they touched on just the purchase part of it. The part that I started working on with a couple of companies, all the upkeep of that machinery, field color sweeps, ripper points, all that kind of stuff that you're not buying anymore. You don't buy any of that. And that's great. So when you start factoring all those numbers into this, maybe the bushels, say you'll go down a couple bushels or 5 bushels of corn, a couple bushels of beans, that savings offsets itself immediately. And you're positive. You're even more positive than you were before. And so I think a lot of what they said was getting your mindset right that you're gonna do this, you're gonna succeed and make it work is huge. And then it's that equipment savings. And then I like where Matt built that deep placement bar. We had one of those when we were Ridgetail, and we're deep placing P and K 25 years ago. That's huge. That's a great way to put those mobile nutrients in. We bought from a company called Osherman Coulters and used it, and worked great with a Baumgard cart so we could variable rate. And that's a great way to get those mobile nutrients in, because that's another point of failure is those nutrients. We put P and K on top and they're not mobile like they should be. We got to get them in the ground, but you don't want much disturbance. And that's where those little narrow coulters get it down in there where you want it, but they're not doing much disturbance because it's not a knife. So I think all those areas were really great points to bring up. But the one that really hit home with me most is getting that mindset right. We're going to make changes. We're going to have some failures. Networking. There's a lot of us out here we can network with. Everybody, we can talk all the time. You put a quarter in me, it won't stop. So, networking is huge. So that's the part of the coalition is the networking side of it is great. So I like their points they made. We can all get together and talk about it.
Right, exactly. And I see someone, Laura D put in the comments, could you explain more about how you connect with others for grazing cover crops, the ease, difficulty in that process, like fencing, water, etc. So we do have the Minnesota Cover Crop Grazing Exchange. It's kind of like a dating app for crop growers and for people with livestock that you can go on that website and find each other. And now they just developed a Midwest Cover Crop Grazing Exchange. So if you want to go across state boundaries, it's easier to find someone in a different state that you can work with. Has anybody on this breakout session utilized that or set up where you have crop ground and you had someone come in and graze it, or vice versa? Because I know with the cropland grazing exchanges, you can set up those agreements however you want. So there's no set limit. So between each farmer, you can determine who pays for what, who maintains what. So it's working really closely with that other person. And I really like what TJ said. And in addition to that, the less that you're running your equipment too, the less wear and tear you're going to have on it. So also the less maintenance you're going to have to do on your equipment. You're putting less hours on your tractors, and you're able to get out there when conditions aren't fully prime. My dad said the co-op loves running on his fields because they're not sliding around everywhere. They're able to stay on track when they're going out to spray. And so they might not be able to hit the neighbors' fields, but they can get into ours and be efficient with it too. And they appreciate that because time is money for, our co-ops as well. So being able to get in there soon after a rain, not track it up, not mud it up everywhere. In our family, we do vertical till, and we've been doing that for, this will be the 4th year, I believe. And what we noticed 2 falls ago in 19, when it was so wet, when my dad was combining, he was able to go through wet conditions, didn't get stuck, didn't get the equipment all dirty. The neighbor just across the line fence, he had tracks on his combine, and he rutted it up, and he had to work up the field that fall later on and the next spring to get those ruts out of there. And so just those changes in management, you don't have to go all no-till cover crops. It's just taking those little steps to work in, where you want to be. Taking small steps, little risk changes, don't do everything overnight. Try it on a 20 or a 40, see how it goes. Has anybody in this group, have they gotten started or thinking about getting started with some different management options? You guys can unmute, this is the time where you can let it all fly. So Miles, what are you seeing in your neck of the woods with people trying? I know you've worked a lot with the local soil health teams and helping to grow them. And now you're focusing more in the south central part of the state. Miles helped form the local soil health teams in southeast Minnesota. And now we're lucky enough to have them in south central Minnesota to work with farmers to try to implement those changes. So we're really lucky to get good expertise from him coming in. Let's see. Is there any...
Yeah, thanks, Jen.
Yeah. So what are you seeing?
And that's what I was going to mention too, maybe in the comments, but since I'm speaking now, for like Laura D had a question in the chat, like, how do you get connected with others for grazing cover crops, things like that? Your local soil and water conservation district or NRCS office, like, we're here to help. We know a lot of people in the area that are already utilizing these practices and can get you connected for that mentorship that Matt was talking about. And that's really where we can act as a very reliant source or middleman for that sort of mentorship there. And then along with the cost assistance for implementing the projects. And then some of us that have been around for a while and helped plan some of these cover crop and reduced tillage practices, we have some secondhand knowledge on the implementation success, what worked, what didn't. So we can just help with some of that secondhand knowledge as well to farmers as they come in and ask questions. As far as adoption rates, the interest I see grows every year. And what I'm seeing actually, and what I'm really excited about seeing as growth in my county, in Faribault County, is more and more people introducing cattle back on the ground and grazing the cover crops, or putting in maybe some more permanent pasture, or doing a seasonal forage planting where they're going to have their cattle during the summer and then grazing the cover crops in the fall. Things like that is what I see coming in my county. And that's really exciting to see, because that's like that fifth principle that we all preach of soil health that is so hard to get in our grain crop production area. So really excited to see that happen. And yeah, interest is out there and growing every year.
Perfect, perfect. Yes, and I know Matt touched on it a little bit. Being able to work with your, your local conservation office for programs as well. There are rules, there are time frames and things like that. But offices, they will have people that can help you get connected with others to learn more about the technical side of it. They can help point you in the direction of another farmer or provide you technical information, and then work into a program opportunity to get funding for it. Because the first few years, that's the hardest, making the changes, taking that risk. And so utilizing a program to do that. EQIP is very good. CSP, that's for after you've done EQIP, after you're comfortable with it. So you start out with EQIP. You can utilize your soil and water programs. A lot of them have programs available for that as well. And so they can help you with technical information and try to get you funding. So it's that risk taking isn't quite so much, as you're going through there. So, if you have questions, you can put an application in. It doesn't tie you to anything. You can always cancel your application. But it provides you an opportunity to try to get some of that cost covered of seed and planting cover crops. They have no-till, strip-till. They also came out this year, they brought back the conservation tillage that they used to have years ago, and that is leaving 30% residue on the field after planting. So the payment on that, I believe, goes from about $5 to $10 an acre this year. But they did bring that back, and I'm thinking that they brought it back because they see that, there's still a need out there. Instead of going, right to no-till or strip-till, bringing in that step option, to work our way there. Because if we have one less tillage pass, we're saving money. We're saving maintenance on our equipment. And there are so many farmers that have been implementing these practices that you can get a hold of. So on the coalition website, we have, find a mentor, and you can find them either by specialty or by location. And then you can contact them, ask them questions. Matt, Tiffany, who spoke earlier, and Brian Pfarr, they're both farmer mentors, and we're getting more and more of them across the state. So it's really exciting. Instead of just having to talk to someone like me, a technical person, we're able to set you up so you can talk with other farmers that have been doing these practices. Excellent. All right. And then I think we're going to be going back. So when we go back into the big group, we're going to kind of bring it all together. We can answer more questions and have Brian and Matt talk more about their transition and what they saw. So if you guys do have any more questions, you still have an opportunity to ask them. And this is being recorded, so we can put that on YouTube so you can view it later too, or everybody's view it if they weren't able to get in on it.
I think we're going to go back to the main session where all three of us are going to get together.
I hear you, Brian. Can you guys
Okay.
still hear me?
Yep.
I'm going to keep answering Lee's question the best I can. I don't know if I have a good one, and maybe other people now in the main session have something to chime in on there too. Is the question was a cover crop mix kind of interseeded at that V4 with Resicor as the herbicide. What else did he have in that mix, Lee?
I mean, I was just coming up with a plan for him, just kind of help him guide to figure out. But to fill everybody else in, I'm Lee Tapper with the Cottonwood Soil and Water down here, and helping a guy come up with a cover crop mix. And he's trying to, we left open his cost share plan for him. And he's got to have everything in by July. So we're thinking about flying something on for him, but kind of a hiccup here, a little hurdle is he's got Resicor, and we're kind of finding challenges with that. So he's kind of willing to change up his herbicide, but he's going to talk with his agronomist first. But if anybody's got any suggestions or help out, that'd be awesome. Because some of his goals, I guess, is soil health, like building that up, and then weed control. So.
Well, I've been interseeding for probably 8-9 years now. Most of the time we're going to go with half rate of harness or something like that early. And if you get that seeded, almost have to incorporate it. I would probably not recommend applying it on. It doesn't take much for incorporation. And I've got guys with rotary hose they've put it in with. One even has just 4 little tines that drag behind it, and that seems to do it. The big thing is going to be moisture. Basically, we're down to terminating our covers and interseeding, and that's our whole herbicide program.
I'm just looking at this sheet that we have, talks about herbicides and interactions and suitable species. You know, Jerry, do you interseed with cereal rye, or is it more of an annual rye?
When you're seeding early, you have to use annual. The cereal normally will die because it lacks the sunlight. And I will say if you're interseeding early, you want to look for varieties that are shorter stature and upright leaves. And the earlier you get it seeded, the better, because it used to be the old saying V4 to V7. I'm actually pushing it earlier yet. When that corn plant is up 3-4 inches, I'm ready to go seed. And that's where if you have a cover crop and do not terminate it until after you plant, you probably got about 30 days that are weed free.
Yeah, so I'll chime in on that too, Jerry. You know, we've been doing a lot of this over here in southern Minnesota. Like you said, we got guys with rotary hose, drag chains. We got some that have gotten really fancy that built the double disc opener systems from some of the companies, but we use annual ryegrass. We got a couple other species we put in, red clover, but that Resicor is really a hard one to work through. So, you know, the first year that could be a pretty tough program with that Resicor in there. If he can change, Penn State's got a really good study out. It's a link you can go to and look at that, and it breaks it down by chemical name and then most of the time what the product is or but the trade name. And you can go through that and look at the different species. But we promote a lot of annual ryegrass, and it doesn't take, like Jerry said, much incorporation. Tom Cotter's got a rotary hoe that's about wore out, and he gets it incorporated with that. So, but the annual really works the best for that. But the herbicide is pretty. Next week when we do this, that's what Tom and I are going to talk more about, is some of the herbicides.
So I got a question for Matt and Brian. You know, using these cover crops and potentially changing our herbicide program, how has reducing tillage and using cover crops affected your weed management? You know, that's something that we kind of worry about when we talk about changing herbicide programs. If we have, you know, water hemp or giant ragweed pressure, what are you guys noticing with the weed pressure with that?
Well, since Brian doesn't want to, or is he sitting there? There he is. Brian, go for it.
Well, no, I just think in the spring with the weed pressure where we had, you know, lamb's quarter pressure, and then I had a question on mine about what, because I haul manure too, and I used to have, it's a huge weed base that's out there. And once I started going with the rye, it was amazing. There was no weed pressure whatsoever. The rye basically choked it all out. Anything that was coming, and we had some giant ragweed areas that were troubles. And yeah, when Matt talked before, the rye just gets out in front of it and really controls the weeds in the spring. Have you been seeing that too, Matt?
Yeah, that's exactly what we've been seeing. And typically when we go no-till our beans into cereal rye, we usually remove our pre-emerge herbicide And we kind of learned that early on, that, or choose better ones, or ones that don't have that application restriction of 3 days after planting, like your sulfentrazones and all of those that tie to residue and then wash off and kill all of our beans. Bayer doesn't like that when you kill all of the variety that they had. So not good. But it gets out early. We haven't seen a need to have that pre-emerge herbicide. And typically then what we'll do is with our post pass, we'll come in, not necessarily always cut out that herbicide. We just may add that in on the post pass to give us a little more residual if we needed to. I did have some learning experiences with really tall rye, that 4 foot tall headed out stuff in 2019, planted great, did a great job shading weeds. I thought, well, this is going to be my weed control, and didn't spray it with all of ours are Extend soybean. Didn't spray the XtendiMax because I didn't really think, there wasn't anything out there. I didn't need to. We got past the 20th of June, and then we got a bunch of rain, and I was going to spray the little weeds that came up with a generic Flex Star. Well, it got so late for that now I'm running into carryover issues with generic Flex Star, and ended up going out there with Cobra. Well, it delayed my weed emergence. They came. Maybe if I would have put in a residual when I terminated, that maybe would have helped, or maybe that's all tied up on the residue. So it does make a little shift in that. How you manage your weeds, it does change it. I think in my situation, now what I know, hindsight's always 20/20, I should have sprayed that dicamba pass early and had whatever residual it would have given me, even though I didn't see a lot of weeds. Of course, the weather just kept raining and I couldn't get out there and spray my generic Flex Star either. So who knows, every year is different. I really like it. I think it's a huge advantage to us. Utilizing it in the corn, same type of deal. If I'm still going to use a residual, my crop plan is to raise bushels, and finding a way to do that without weeds is kind of my goal. And I don't like weeds. They eat my dollars. So if we can utilize the cover crop to be cheaper than the dollars I spend on herbicide, there we are. We've now gained. So I like them for weed control.
Matt, have you ever done any roller crimping, like on the rye? Has it ever gotten big enough? Well, the one year you said it did, but you said it was wet out in the fields. But have you ever done any experimenting with the roller crimper to terminate the rye?
I have not crimped to terminate. I tried it. I have a smooth roller that they want us to use so we don't get dirt pads and stuff for seed that goes to Canada. But I tried it with a smooth roller on that 4 foot tall stuff. That did not terminate it. I didn't think it was gonna, but I thought, well, I'm gonna try it. And it just rolled it down and then it stood back up. So I have not done that. I did notice even after I sprayed it, I sprayed the 4 foot tall stuff, then rolled it, and it laid it down. And those beans did better than the stuff I didn't roll at all. So I terminated them both. Some I rolled and some I left tall. And I did have a yield difference in the stuff that I rolled down and flattened after it was terminated. But I have not terminated with a crimper.
So Brian, how did you get started out using cover crops? I know we've done some testing out in your fields, and you've tried a few different things, and you are where you are right now, but how did it go for you starting out, and which way did you end up going with it?
Well, the one way I started out is I was at a training session. It was about cover crops, and I was speaking at it. One of the people that were in the group that was talking to me said, "Well, do you do it on your farm?" And at that point, I said, "No, I don't." And then you could just see, like, well, why should we listen to you? And so when I started out, just kind of like what Matt said, I started out with 20 acres or 25 acres, I think it was, and just doing that rye. like Matt was talking, very, very forgiving. I mean, there wasn't really too much to worry about. I had to buy the seed. I did it without a program. I just wanted to try and see how it goes. And we kind of started from there. And it basically is to get my dad to go along with it too. So now we've got over half of our production is doing that continuous no-till. So, and it's like Matt says, you learn something every year. And then working with people that have done it too before, that's a big deal for that to say, hey, don't do this, do this. And I think the biggest thing with new producers that I work with now too is keeping it simple. That one species, two species, just to get it started. And you learn so much as you go. And then the savings, it's tangible. Like for my dad, it was like, look at all these night crawlers all over. I mean, that to me, that was his eye opener, even though there was other things coming along with it. So many times we get kind of caught up in, you know, the big fancy words and what's happening, but just those tangible things, all those good things are going to come with it. It just, once you get started, it's amazing how quickly your soil can change and how much more moisture you can hold, and the erosion and the weed pressure and all those different things change. That's kind of how I got started into it. And it's like, well, it worked on this field. Why don't we do it on this field? But if we would have started whole scale right away, I don't think I'd have stick down this path. So by starting small, learning from my mistakes, that helped me to grow into doing, you know, over half of my farming operation that way.
Well, yeah, because you do no-till corn, soybeans, and cover crop every other year.
Right.
And we've seen soil improvements from doing that. And then what about your agronomics? What about your yield? What about your nitrogen use?
Yeah, I was kind of like in the same situation as Matt too. I was at that 180 for nitrogen, and now we don't apply anything over the 140 because my organic matter levels have increased, you know, anywhere from 1.2 to 1.7 in that 8-year span that I've been doing this. So then I'm able to take credit for more nitrogen because of the higher organic matters. So that's saving me money right off the bat without sacrificing yield. That's always the first question I got. Well, by doing that, did you sacrifice any yield? And I do side by side to prove one way or the other. And that's the way I kind of can help people understand. It's like, well, you did the whole field. How can you prove it? But I do side by sides. And just, you know, the savings that I have in my tillage and what I have saved on nitrogen, that's what that's tangible. Like here it is. And this is my profit margins.
I'm going to try to answer Lance's question there, part of it. Water infiltration. So this year, great year, phenomenal year for us here in Southwest Minnesota. We had good yields. We had a drier, timely planting season. We got good rains early. It did dry out a little bit in August. And I know that took some of our top end of our corn yields, at least here. So I had one no-till cornfield. My other no-till fields were beans or rye. I had one conventional till field. They had ripped bean ground before. It was real fun. It gave my grandpa something to do in the field cultivator. He worked it. He loved it because he got to work, because otherwise he doesn't do anything in the spring. So compare it, and they both yielded well. They both had great yield. And I'll tell you my yields, and I'm not trying to brag, it's just how it was. The no-till went 228. Higher ground, that was my highest yielding corn. My conventional till worked it, you know, in the spring, had ruts out there because it was really soft and fluffy. Had erosion from the rain, went 223, still really good corn yield. 5 bushels better in the no-till. And I think where we gained that is when it dried out, my no-till hills saved that moisture that we had because we had residue, we weren't evaporating as much, and that soil structure was different, that it held that water. Much like we saw, well, I couldn't play the video, but what I saw in 2018 was that water is there. And I think I saw the same thing in 2019 in that region where we had the cover crop, and we were quite a bit higher corn yield side by side, is that soil on the hill could hold that water instead of it running off to the bottom. So I really think the cover crops helps a lot with that, and the less tillage. And for me, the strip till is maybe an in-between to transition to more of that. The cereal rye, I really think is. His other part of the question, major increases in worms. Had a group of high school kids out this summer. We have a summer ag course that our school offers. They came out, bunch of young females, which was great to see a bunch of young females interested in ag. I got 2 girls, so it was good. They came out, they had temp probes, they had moisture probes, they had all of this stuff. I brought the spade, and we went out to a just recently harvested cereal rye field. Went out there, stuck the spade in, pulled out the spade, 20 worms. And we counted them, and not just little peetly guys, big old night crawlers. 20 of them in this spade. We move over 30 feet into the soybeans. No-tilled soybeans, no cover crop, but no-tilled soybeans. We had 6. We're 20 feet over. I mean, worms travel. 6 worms there, 20 worms here. And it was that living root that we had all year since, so we planted soybeans, harvested the early soybeans, planted our cereal rye for a crop. The cereal rye overwintered, grew the whole year. We had just harvested it. Then we seeded a cover crop, and then that's going to overwinter, and then we're going to no-till soybeans. So we're essentially having 3 years of a living root growing in that soil profile undisturbed. To now we can change that soil. We'll grow those soybeans, and then we're going to no-till corn into it. So the cover crops, the minimizing tillage, is our tool to change that soil to essentially make us more money. That's the goal. And I don't think we're going to see a yield decrease by doing so in our corn. So.
And I've been doing some soil health testing out in the field. Did it this fall. Yes, I need to finish compiling it and getting that out in a format for everybody to see. So I will be putting that together, emailing it to the members and putting it on our website. But typically what I have been seeing in the conventionally tilled fields is we're getting about at best half inch of water per hour infiltration rate. So all the ground that has conventional, tillage on it, half inch of water per hour is that average rate. I'm not talking really sandy soils. Really sandy soils, that's going to be a totally different beast. This is for loams, clay loams, slippery clay loams. So I have that information available, and what I'm finding through vertical till, no-till, strip till, we're increasing those to, the lowest I had was 3 inches per hour up to like 17 inches per hour. And this is on the 2nd inch. So it's not just the 1st inch of water infiltration, this is the 2nd inch. I was really blown away this fall looking at those numbers. Worm counts were fantastic, although by the time I got out there, it was very, very cold and hard to dig. And so a lot of the worms had already migrated deeper down into the soil profile. So that I should have gone out when it was really warm out to check worms. But the coalition is completing soil health testing, and we'll provide that information. We won't say exactly whose field it was on, but you'll be able to see their management, their soil type, what their soil tests came about, because I know, and I shared it on Facebook, can I say that it was Brian's fields, where I couldn't believe how much worm scat, feces, waste there was. It was almost like 40% of the soil in the top 3 inches. And I know when I've been out to Matt's fields and looked around, I find the same thing. And I find the roots growing down 47 plus inches, even though the cover crops haven't been growing that long. And we see all these worm tunnels filled with worm feces, and all that's nutrients for your crops growing. So I will get that data published before the spring, so you guys can see what came about, but we are doing testing.
Well, and we always do 5th grade ag day too, and a lot of times we have to talk about soil erosion versus what, with wind and water and all that. And one of the questions I always ask the kids, I'm like, if you had a beautiful house and you had it built there and this is your ideal dream home, but every single year, 3 times a year, a tornado came through and destroyed it, what are you going to do? And they're like, well, we would move. And that's kind of how we treat, like with the worms, is if you keep destroying that soil structure and tearing that ground up, they're going to move on. And we see that so often. I'm same situation as Matt. I did a conventional till. Well, I was actually going in my no-till first that I've been doing for 5 years. And I scooped down and I found 13 worms in one scoop shovel. And then my situation, I moved 50 feet away where I was doing conventional tillage. I had to dig 6 holes to find 1 worm. That wasn't a night crawler, but in the other one, I was finding the actual big, fat, juicy night crawlers. So it's interesting to see when that worm situation, how much that makes a difference in a short period of time. And the worms are doing my tillage for me. When I look at it, I don't, and the residue that they take down with them, it's just amazing. I had some of the fields that it got so healthy so quickly, and I didn't have enough carbon in my mix. So that's why I kind of went to the rye. But some of my fields, there was no residue left in the fall because the worms took it all. I was just amazed by how much they take down and incorporate. But they're doing my tillage for me. So.
And maybe this is for Matt, Brian, anyone else that has, I see Jerry's on. So if you have a rolling landscape, strip till might not work all that well. If you've got complex hills and things like that, you've got a lot of slope. What is a good alternative to that rolling ground to strip till so that we don't get that water, following the strips? What have you guys noticed with that?
I haven't really had a whole lot of strips washing out on the downhill stuff, and we have rolling landscape. Typically, we've already kind of changed those farms so we plant across the hills and not up and down them, which I think most people should do, if it makes sense. I mean, you can't farm across them if it's only 200 yards type thing. But we have not had many strips wash out. We have had some in the front on the first year. Part of that was adjustment on the machine. We've made some adjustments on how we did stuff. We leave the lumpiest, no, I shouldn't say the lumpiest. We try to leave a lumpier strip to try to slow that water down. And I've heard of some people talking about too fine of a strip will wash out in the winter or spring, probably more springtime with snow melt and whatnot. But we haven't had a lot of issues with that. If you do, I guess switching and looking towards a spring strip option is probably a good choice. Strip it a couple days before you plant and go ahead and plant, and that's probably more of a Coulter type machine. Jerry has all sorts of people that do it by him. It's just me here. I do see a question by Miles down here in the chat room, and this is always something that everybody tells me. It's one of the risks or the challenges is it's cold. It's colder. And I had a guy this year bought some rye from me. He's from down by Blue Earth, came up, and he has the smart firmers on his planter. And so as he's going through the field, it's telling him moisture and temperature and organic matter and all of this, which, believe it or not, I don't know if he ground truthed it or what, but it's at least some way to measure. And he told me, and I think he had over 1,000 acres cover crop, a sizable farm. Every field that he had cereal rye growing in was 6 degrees warmer than the fields that did not. And this would have been, well, probably early May this year, planting beans. So 6 degrees warmer in a no-till cornfield with a cover crop growing. So that tells me, okay, if you want a no-till and it's southern Minnesota and it's cold, or northern Minnesota where it's probably colder, plant a cover crop because it raises your soil temp. Now, that piques my interest. I'll have a bunch of temp probes out and I'll be checking cover crop versus no cover crop and see. The strip tills, I haven't seen a difference in temperature between my neighbor's conventional till fields. I ask them because I don't have any conventional till fields. So I'm comparing strip till versus their conventional till. I haven't seen an issue. I know there's been a lot of data out there. In the strip is the same temp as conventional till, in between is cooler. I can certainly make a case for that. My no-till stuff I know has been cooler in the spring. No-till bean stubble going to corn I know has been cooler, but you don't plant those fields first. Some fields are going to be first, some are going to be last, and you just kind of plan ahead that maybe that's going to be one of my later fields. I can't plant them all in 1 or 2 days. How do you adjust that? I've tried coming up with good ideas. One theory was, so on my Coulter Bar, I put a row cleaner in front. And in the fall, I just move some of that residue where my Coulter is going to run, where I'm going to plant. I'm not doing any tillage, I'm just moving residue. Essentially making residue strips with the idea that darker residue strip in where my fertilizer is going to warm up faster. I haven't gotten there yet. I haven't seen a real need to. A lot of what soybeans we do are early maturity beans that grow 15 inches tall and never shade the row, and they don't have much residue. And when you harvest it in early September, most falls it's broken down pretty good by the spring that we don't have a lot of residue. So that's our situation, but that would be one of my fixes. If I was going to no-till consistently on lots of bean residue, I would maybe try making just a row cleaner bar to move some of that residue. But I'm a problem solver and I like to think on things in the middle of the night. So that's what I might do. I don't know if that answered your question, Miles.
Yeah, it was not so much a question. I just wanted your observations on it. We did a bunch of soil temperature testing down in Freeborn County with the Freeborn area SWCD and Freeborn area soil health team. And we saw the same thing. When you have a cover crop growing, we all know that air warms faster than water, right? And so that cover crop is transpiring water, getting more air pulled into the soil. That's what's warming the soil up faster than just our typical no-till field. So I was more so interested in what your soil temps were versus the neighbors and your planting date versus the neighbors, if you're seeing anything different with that.
We're always planting the same time. Well, we have one neighbor that has to be first. I don't plant that time. They were planting corn in the first week of April this year. I thought it was beets, but it was corn. Good for them. We're typically right at the same time as everybody else. In 2018 and 2019, when it was wet, those no-till fields, they were wetter. But no-tilling them was still the better choice instead of working this wet field to try to dry it so I can plant at the same time. I don't know what everybody's yields are, but I wasn't going to go out there and work a wet field in the first week of June to plant corn. Should have planted it and tiled it, but that's why we got rye there this year. So we'll tile after that. But we typically are planting right at the same time. Talking with our agronomists we work with, it sounds like our yields are right in the ballpark with everybody else, if not a little higher, but we spend less to get it. That's the kicker. The strip till and the no-till, less cost, same yield, higher profit. And that's what we're after. I do like benefiting the soil, but I know that it's going to put more money in my pocket. So get my wife that vacation.
Well, kind of going to Miles' comment is I worked with Miles on that project down here in southern Minnesota, and The other thing we saw, and Miles can maybe talk about this if you wanted to, but after tillage, we had a farm that we had data loggers on a tillage farm. And after the tillage, we saw this huge spike in the ground temperature. Then we got a cold rain and it fell out of bed. I mean, went up close to 100 degrees, 80, 90 some degrees, then back down in the 50s. My uncle's no-till field right next to it didn't see like a 1 or 2 degree variation in it. So it goes back to that whole, and we haven't talked about this yet, soil biology. You start raising your biological levels in your soil, they're active, they're doing their job already, they're mineralizing nutrients, they're starting to feed plants. That's huge. That's getting the carbon in there. That's the whole nine, what Brian talked about, being short of carbon. Keep those roots out there, keep pounding carbon in the soil. So that all comes with that. And then during the summer, the respiration side, when you got that nice cover laying on top, it doesn't get as hot during the summer either. And that's huge, is that summer heat. You know, I was a seed corn dealer for years, and I used to laugh. You want to get rid of somebody, stake them down in a cornfield for a couple of days, and you won't have to come back and find anything but a pile of goo because it gets so hot out there. Well, when you keep it cool, your corn does what it's supposed to do. So beans too. So that residue mat is huge in the summer times.
Yeah, just to keep working off of what TJ said with that study. When they went and dug the field in spring to get ready for planting, and then it rained, they pretty much lost all that warmer soil that they had created by fluffing it up, and it reset it right with the no-till field. And then the lines were pretty much back to being on top of each other as far as soil temperature goes. So they're only warming their soil up until that first rain is what we were seeing on our soil temperature loggers.
I don't know, Matt. We just completed a 3-year study with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture in our watershed, comparing strip till and cover crops as compared to conventional tillage in the same soil type. And for 3 years, our cover crop fields were 2 to 3 degrees warmer than bare soil. And so I thought it maybe should have been a little more, and I was surprised when you said the guy said it was 6 degrees warmer.
That's what he told me. I don't know if he actually got out and looked at the real thermometer, but he said it was pretty consistent every field. And that's what I'm going off of. I haven't checked, so I'll check this next year.
Well, I know Dr. Shannon Brown with the Agriculture Research Service explained it to me one time, saying, well, your cereal rye is growing early. It's absorbing sunlight, which is heat, whereas making that heat is down to its roots. And I guess they have probes out at SDSU where they have cover and where bare soil is. And she said it's always warmer where the cover is as compared to bare soil.
So everybody should buy more cereal rye this next year.
All right, last call for questions. Anyone have any last minute questions?
I think one thing we should hit on quick, Jennifer, too, is when guys are first starting, talk to your crop insurance people about what you're doing. There's some different termination guidelines through I travel a big area of the U.S. There's different termination guidelines for these covers that are overwintering, and let your agents know what you're doing. So if you have a hail claim or something and an adjuster comes out, they know what you're doing. So I have guys that are doing interseeding, had some hail, and they went with the adjuster and said, yeah, I planted this. This is a cover crop. This is what I'm doing. And it's been accepted by RMA as a best managed practice, but you need to let everybody know what you're doing so that if there is a claim, you're not getting penalized and somebody wrote in there, oh, it's a weedy mess out there. No, it wasn't weeds. We put it there for a reason. Here's what's happening. So crop insurance becomes big. And I know when you listen to the big gurus at the big conferences, they'll say, we don't need crop insurance anymore. Yeah, you know what? Listen, guys, crop insurance still has its place. So it's not just abandon the ship. I've got a lot of customers down in Iowa where that Dorico went through. They're damn glad they had crop insurance this year. They're damn glad they had it because that 100-mile-an-hour wind flattened everything out. So you still need it. You wouldn't drive your car without insurance. You wouldn't have your building site without insurance on it. So you still got to have some levels of coverage. So it's great to think we can eliminate or manage it better, but elimination is, I don't believe in that. I'm sorry. Maybe I'll probably offend some people by saying that here, but it's a safety net for a reason, but you need to let everybody know what you're doing. And then most of the agents, most of the RMA, I mean, Mark Guthrie up there at the State's really good to work with. He'll explain it to you. So that's my spiel on that.
That's a perfect point, or perfect points, TJ. Thank you. Yes. And talk with your agronomist too. You know, if you're going to start implementing cover crops, work with your agronomist, let them know so they can help you find the right herbicide program. And also on the coalition website under resources and technical info, you can find the Penn State, Iowa, and Wisconsin herbicide carryover charts. You know, so that way you can look up, you know, what you're using, what the carryover, the half-life is on that. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Thank you, Matt and Brian, for providing this information. This will also be put on YouTube, so you guys can watch it later. And we'll probably see you guys next week at the next virtual event. Have a great day, everyone.